Welcome back. Will Robinson here from Robinson's Auto, toolsandtime.com. Today in the shop we have this 2004 Jeep Cherokee Laredo. As you see, it's been lifted. There's been a lot of custom work done to it, but it's here today because it was experiencing what they call death wobble. It's when you're traveling at a certain rate of speed, you hit a little bump or something just gets that front end going and it's hard to stop it. Sometimes you got to come to a complete stop just to get it under control. I'm going to take you underneath. I'm going to show you some common things to look for, which I didn't find with this vehicle, but I'll tell you how I corrected it, what I did to correct it, and the death wobble has since been corrected. However, we're going to go in there and we're going to install a double stabilizing shock system. The suspension kit in this vehicle is not a Rough Country. I'm not affiliated or sponsored by them in any way. I simply found a dual stabilizing system that had some really good reviews on it, and we're going to opt to use that on this vehicle. So the first thing I did when the vehicle came in, I got it up on the lift and I wanted to go over the style suspension that they had in it. I've seen that the control arms are indeed adjustable. They look like whoever did this not only bolted them but welded them, so they took some time to install this properly. So I found a known spot, essentially an index mark on each side of the frame. These happen to be like holes, like a 1/2 inch hole I would call it. And I measured from the center of this hole to the rear. Did that on both sides to make sure we were square from a known reference point to the axle tube. Front was good, came back to the back, did the same thing, found a good reference point, not the bracket that was added. I found an original location on the frame that I could use as a reference, measured from this point to the axle tube, same thing on the other side, made sure the rear was square to the frame, to the chassis. Everything measured up pretty good within a 1/16 of an inch. It was really close. So whoever installed these did a really good job. So I was able to move on. The next thing I did, front and back, I make sure there's no play in any of the bushings and you could check them up and down, side to side. If you have to, take some weight off the vehicle and also check them that way. Try not to get them too much under a load and see if you can move them. So next I went and I started checking all the bushings for play, just giving it the wiggle test, and everything was testing out solid. And this kit I don't think it has many miles on it at all. So on this particular vehicle, it did it ever since the kit was put in. So everything's been replaced essentially. The ball joints are nice and tight. All these Hyman joints, everything was essentially brand new. There's really no play in this front end whatsoever. So I assure you everything is tight in this front end. So another concern we have is the steering box and any kind of flex that we might have in the frame rail. So sometimes you got to stiffen these up. Came in here, located the bolts for the steering box, and made sure those are nice and tight. I figured, you know what, if I have to, I'll take this washer fluid reservoir off there and I'll make some kind of plate back here for reinforcement, which I've done in the past if the flame rails are flexing. But I didn't see too much flex going on in this one. I had someone go up in the vehicle and wiggle the wheel back and forth to make sure I didn't see too much movement or hear anything clunking. All it takes is a little bit of play to get these things to go out of control. I'm going to go up in the vehicle. I'm going to wiggle the wheel for you. All right, and as you've seen, there wasn't a whole lot of flex going on. So at this point, I decided to put my heads on it for the four-wheel alignment, and we did some checks, and I'll share them with you here. Okay, just to go over a few things for those of you that might be beginners or whatnot. As you hear me going through this, this is your tie rod. This is what ties both front wheels together. So tie rod ties both front wheels together. This here is the drag link. The drag link comes off of the pitman arm, which is part of your steering box. It comes off the bottom of your steering box. Pitman arm, sometimes you'll hear that mentioned. They come in different drop sizes depending on the lift and whatnot. So pitman arm, drag link goes to the right front knuckle. Tie rod, again, attaches both front wheels together. And then our lower control arms, which I gave you a shot of in the back. On your vehicle, if it's stock suspension, you usually have an upper control arm that comes off of here and up to the bracket in the back. And if I was this guy, I'd probably put another upper control arm on this side. Now it uses upper and lower. It takes the place of the upper control arm on this side and uses just the bottom lower control arm. They all work in tandem on this particular lift kit. And as you can see, the upper control arm portion, even though this works in tandem with the lower control arm, is used to adjust your caster, so your pitch of this front rear, or your pinion angle. In addition, you have your upper and lower ball joints. These are your steering knuckles, and you want to make sure those are tight. Your tie rod ends are tight. Now you will have play like this, but you shouldn't have play like this or any slop. Same thing with this style hymen joint up there, or any ball joint style connecting rod. You will have a little bit of like turn in motion, but you shouldn't have any play, if that makes sense. All right, then if you come underneath here, you'll see your track bar behind the stabilizer shot. Goes from here to here. Its job is to pretty much keep your axle centered, square. All right, so now I'm going to show you a screenshot of the initial reading I had once I put it on the four-wheel alignment machine. Toe is out. Your toe is adjusted with your tie rod. This is what connects both your front wheels together. So as I adjust one of these hymen joints, I can either toe it in or toe it out. Toe in, toe out. Okay, we adjusted the toe. I'll give you a shot of where I put it. But more importantly, I had to adjust the caster. The camber is not adjustable. These are fixed steering knuckles on this vehicle, so I can't adjust the camber, but the caster was pretty far out. It's almost as if they were more concerned about the pinion angle than they were of the actual front end alignment. So I had to find a happy medium to where my pinion angle was acceptable, yet my caster was within range. When you think of caster, one way I could help try to make it more clear is if you look at these knuckles, they are now raked out, almost like a bicycle. Before, they were raked back, kind of putting your front fork, if you're a bicycle, more underneath you. Now, with the caster out, we can see we put the tires more ahead. The effects that will do, especially on a vehicle like this, is it makes the steering more sensitive. In addition, I found more prone to the death wobble. So I adjusted the caster, I adjusted the toe, went for a ride, and the death wobble was essentially gone. I wanted to give his front end a little bit more stability, so I installed a stabilizer shock, which he had. Usually this one is mounted to a lower bracket here, but I'll give you a shot here. Someone cut that bracket off, and it usually goes from this bracket to the tie rod on the stock Jeep. I opted to put this one up here, and I was going to leave it at that. And if this is all you have, this is a terrific fix, especially if you have a little extra flex going on up here in your frame or whatnot. You use your bolt for your drag link. I'll give you a shot of this bracket. You come up here, you'll see the bolt that goes through your upper bushing on your track bar. You take that out, you put a little bit longer bolt in there, you install the bracket with the spacer. As this one is lifted, I didn't want to put this front stabilizer up too high. I wanted to try to keep it pretty much even with the drag link. Installed it here, went out, installed the aftermarket adapter onto the drag link. That gave the steering wheel a more cushiony feel, in addition, more stability in the front end. Those two combined, the front end alignment and that stabilizer, took care of the death wobble. Today, what I want to do is take it to the next step Now that I know that we were able to take care of it simply with one stabilizer and the wheel alignment. The wheel alignment, I don't think there's much sense in showing you guys because most of you guys are not going to have a four-wheel alignment machine. However, I can show you how I'm going to install this dual stabilizer. Here's a closer look at the front differential, and you can see someone hacked off the stabilizer bracket. As I mentioned earlier, the kit I'll be using today is made by Rough Country, and it comes with a bracket that mounts to the rear. This bolt here is supposed to go through your stock stabilizer bracket, which is cut off on this vehicle. So when I mount this up, I'll get it square, and then I'll reinstall a new bracket and weld it to the rear housing. This is just another bracket that mounts up front. I believe after everything's assembled, or yeah, this goes on essentially like this. We'll get a closer look once we put it on. This is the U clamp. It goes around the rear. It's going to go like this. For the one that goes on the tie rod, the drag link is supposed to hook up to the knuckle, or I might be wrong. It might be the tie rod. It's supposed to hook up to one of the original clamps, the pinch clamps. However, this style of suspension does not have that, so we'll be using that aftermarket bracket in one of those locations. So we'll take a closer look once we get in there. First, we got to get this mounted on the front rear. Let's see what we got to do. All right, so first thing first, we take this bracket here. Like I said, the paint isn't already flaking off, so I'll have to rough that off and retouch it up once we get it put back together. We're going to take our U-bolt and put it through the back. We're going to start our nuts, these nuts. I'm going to put 2 top locks on this for now. Probably what's going to stay on there. Like I said, I already have the alignment set on this, so this rear caster is where it's going to stay, because when you adjust your caster, you're going to adjust your angle in this rear. And like I said, we don't have this bracket here anymore to make sure we're bolted up square, but it looks like this will be right about here is square. We're going to snug this up. 14 millimeter. I'm not going to go all the way tight because I want to try to get the same angle. I know that this used to come out straight. So I'm going to put a piece of angle iron on here, get the right angle on this bracket, and I'll tack weld the new bracket on there. I got a piece of angle iron here. I'm going to have to clean this up to square it a little bit because the way they had it cut. So let me square up their cut here with a grinder. All right, and just like that, I stick welded this bracket on there. I weld the inside and out. That way, in case it ever flexes, it doesn't break. A little bit of grinder and paint will make me the welder I ain't, but I think it still did better than whoever did this. That doesn't even look like it has any penetration whatsoever. However, I chamfered it and then stick welded it. 6011 farmer rod. Spin this down like so. I'm going to mark this hole. Push back up. Now we'll drill that out. All right, I'm going to close this one out for tonight. I hit it with some etching primer first, let that dry, and then I went over it with flat black paint. Looks a little glossy right now, but it should dry to a matte finish like the rest of it. I'm gonna let that dry overnight. Tomorrow morning we'll get a fresh start. I'll pull this down, we'll bolt it up, and we'll finish with the rest of the kit. Through the power of editing, here we are 24 hours later. The paint has dried up nicely on our Jeep rear. Bracket's in place. Now the new bracket will swing down. Everything lines up nicely. But what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna come up here and remove this upper stabilizer that I had put in there temporarily for the road test to prove everything out. So, because I'm gonna need to utilize this bracket. Square this all up for the most part, get a good starting point. So I can move this a little bit. I think it's gonna be right where it needs to be. Take two. Due to the longer bolts and the tighter tolerance here, it's hard to get those bolts up in. If I turn the wheel all the way to the left, I believe I can get it. However, I'm just gonna rotate it back up. You choose to use this rough country bracket. Put that in there now. At that point, we're gonna install our bolt here. This is the only one I'm gonna tighten for now. This is pretty much gonna square us up because it is what it is. It's the only rigid mount. Give it a nice little click, click. All right, next we're gonna install our first stabilizer. Now in my case, I left the wheel straight. I extended the piston fully. It's about 7 inches. Split it in half, 3.5. Flat washer on top. Top lock style nut. Leave it a little loose for now. If the bushing didn't come with the sleeve installed, make sure you install that first. This one I had to tap in. Pretty much you could put it in once it's here or on a bench with a vise. It goes in relatively easy. Now you see I have the 2 U-bolts through. We're gonna wanna put this on next, but you wanna put this through first because you're gonna run into that same clearance problem as you did on the other side. All right, install these nuts. Install the shock like so. Install your flat washer on top. And this is a top lock style nut. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before. This has a 7-inch stroke, right around 7 inches. So I went 3.5. Went out to 7 inches. And as you can see, I'm at 3.5 now. Just split the difference. You could always adjust it, easy enough. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna take and tighten this side up and see where we end up. Trying to keep it on a pretty straight plane. I'll do the rest of the tightening by hand. Okay. All right, same thing. I pulled this out, 3.5. Install shock, pretty straightforward. I don't think I gotta bring you guys in there. I gotta take and slide this bracket down. Hopefully it lands where I need it. So I got the spacer. It's gonna go behind here, like so. I'm gonna have to drill that out. I'm drill this out to a 1/2 inch. Okay, so here's the final look. We're gonna go up there and make sure we have enough throw, especially on that side. This side's nice, because regardless of where this tie rod goes, we're good. Same thing with, I'm pretty happy with this. You know, I can push it center and it'll stay there. But that's just the nature of that style drag link. Everything's tight. Next, we're just gonna make sure we turn the wheel from left to right. Knock that bolt out just to make sure we're not too far in, but it might be perfect. I feel better now. This is where we end up with like a 1/2 inch. And if I could compress this fully 100%. So I know we're not bottoming out on a stabilizer. Guys, so far we've been okay. I'm on a back road now. I've taken it up to highway speeds with no problem. I gotta see why that brake light's on. That's been on, even though the e-brake, or it's probably a level switch in the reservoir. But you want to be able to take this thing above 30 on a back road before without it going into a severe death wobble. Just fine now. I'm taking back to the shop. I'll have the customer come and take her for a ride. And bam, just like that, we got some feedback from the owner. He says it drives great. I like that the steering wheel is aligned. So-and-so said, oh, we got the steering wheel the best we could. You have it perfect. So I wanted to get this feedback from the owner prior to posting the video, of course. So he gave me the go-ahead. He said, your roads are too smooth. I hardly hit bumps, but I did hit a manhole cover hard and even turned around and hit it again, and it didn't even flinch. And I don't think the steering is heavy at all. So I brought up some concerns that the steering might be a little bit heavier with the dual stabilizers, but he said it seems fine. And this is the part I want to emphasize on. He said, I love that it returns to center on its own. That's new to me. I want to share this demonstration of caster. So caster, like we brought up earlier, is a very critical thing. It's like a bicycle when you run that rake out. The reason why it's raked, or on a motorcycle and whatnot, it puts that tire to centering point, the vertical line. Imagine that imaginary vertical line center, and you push that, you rake that front wheel out a little bit further. It changes that center point. So when I think back to the basic fundamentals of alignments, and when they went over caster, it was stability and centering. That's what they drove into my head, stability and centering. So it gives you that natural ability to center itself with that caster being positive. Because when your steering angle, when you turn the wheel, it's going to push the front out, and then it's going to naturally want to straighten itself back out. So as you become more neutral with your caster, as you can imagine, you become more unstable and you start losing that ability to center. And then if you go negative caster, it becomes very dangerous. I'm sure we've all pushed those shopping carts where it's not self-aligned in the wheels or whatnot. And a lot of that is stability and centering. You know, that caster is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I love reading the feedback. And ring that bell if you want to be notified of future videos. Thanks for watching.